Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining me. You're very welcome. I hope this is going to be something useful for you and for me today. Well, I'm almost there, but I have to confess I'm not quite finished. The truth is I forgot to get some more super glue. You'll remember I have been trying to do something about this gift that I was given that unfortunately met with an accident. And I'm trying to fix it. And I've done the handle, I've done the sides of the thing. There's quite a few cracks. It's not going to be something that you're ever going to put any liquid in, but put it on my shelf behind me. I will have a pretty good representation of what I was given out of the kindness of my heart, of the hearts of my friends. The thing to say is that this thing is never going to be perfect. I'm going to have to get some filler because some of the pieces are missing. Then I'm going to have to get some paint and I'm going to have to touch it up. But nevertheless, I've preserved something of worth and of value. And I think it is a bit of a metaphor in terms of what we are going through in our lives. We sometimes deal with things that are not so perfect, and we are not perfect, but we can be good enough. And you know, change may not be 100%, but it's good enough that you and I can function in the world today. So what am I wanting to do today? Well, we're talking about cross-cultural competence. And I want to give some explanation about why we're doing this. You remember a while ago, we were talking about emotional dependencies. And we were talking about the fact that, you know, it's a struggle getting out of difficult relationships and getting ourselves into a more balanced kind of lifestyle. And to do that, we have to begin to deal with the deeper issues. And you'll remember that what we did last week was to begin to look at one of the most practical ways that you can begin to deal with the deeper issues. And that's about being assertive. So last week focused very much on growing assertiveness, because you're not born with assertiveness. And some of us naturally are less outgoing, perhaps, and less willing to engage with life, because life has sometimes been risky for us. But what we're doing right now is to grow that assertiveness. And in today's session, I'm hoping to give a few more keys. Vanya, greetings. Lovely to see you. Minu, very good to see you. Thank you for coming. And Mike and Fiona Gascoigne. I mispronounced your name last week. I'm really sorry. It's great to see you. And just by the way, if I don't know you, I won't read out your name. So do understand that unless I know you and I know you're okay with me mentioning your name, I won't mention you. Kylie, you're welcome. So let's get on to this now. What do we mean by cultural competence? And I would like to offer this definition to you today. Cultural competence is the ability to interact effectively with people of different cultures. Now, why is this relevant to us? Well, you know, I would even say it's relevant to ourselves because sometimes we're dealing with cultures even within ourselves. So there's a kind of intra-cultural issue that we have to deal with. We have to learn to know ourselves well. You'll remember that one of the things that we started to say about emotional dependency is that somebody who's inclined to emotional dependency is continually looking for affirmation from somebody else. And when they start to receive that, they latch onto it so tightly because of the attachment issues and wounding around attachment that it becomes unbalanced. It almost becomes obsessive. So the reason why I'm holding this book up, you'll remember that last week we spoke about the inner child, and my team in Core Issues Trust have had great fun about this, mocking me endlessly, referring to themselves in the diminutive all the time. They're pulling my leg, no doubt. But looking for your inner child is really important in terms of understanding yourself. And the point to all of this is, if we understand ourselves, if we empower ourselves, if we're sure about what we believe, what we want, what we don't want, then we'll escape this kind of compliance mode that often we get into, that also makes us very vulnerable in terms of emotional dependency. Okay, so back to our definition. Culture and being competent in terms of how we relate to people who are very different to us is going to be something that empowers us and enables us to communicate better, and therefore helps our assertiveness a level and ability in life. That's the theory that I'm working with. I guess a good place to start is the fact, hello from Malaysia. You're so welcome. Thank you for coming. What a privilege to have people from other countries. One of the biggest mistakes I think we can make is to assume that people are the same, or, you know, to go with a whole set of ideas that we have worked out well, we've thought things through. And it can be that we are almost in shock when we find that when we communicate our ideas, they're rejected, or the people who are listening to what we have, they really struggle to get a hold of even the basic concepts that we're sharing. And it's not because anybody lacks intelligence. I guess that may be an issue sometimes, but more realistically, what's happening is that we are confronting a new culture, or a different culture, or a culture that we have not prepared for or not understood. And because we've not understood that culture, we're going to have to find a way of overcoming that misunderstanding, perhaps going away and coming back, having studied the culture we're coming into, and then trying again. We have to look for hooks that they will be interested in. We'll have to overcome the prejudices that they have, because they have experienced life in a certain way. And when we come with our ideas, it's going to be troublesome if we don't relate what we're doing well to the culture that they're growing up in. Well, hopefully you'll get this as we progress. Let me just say that there have been some really important contributions in the world of, I guess, sociology, business management, this kind of discipline area. And one of the ones that I really like has come from a group of Dutchmen, actually, Hofstede. Don't know if I'm saying that right. Hofstede. Apologies if I didn't get it right. But I think that's right. He wrote this simple but really important book. I'm not necessarily suggesting you go out and get it, but some of the concepts that I'm going to be using today come from this. And the reason why I'm interested in this work is because this is grounded. This is actual research that was done when this man was part of IBM, I believe, this big multinational company, I guess in the 80s, that really was a successful company. I have no idea where it is today. But the point is, he did all of this research and consolidated it pretty much in the ideas that I think he shares even today. And he's come up with some things that I find of real practical value. Now, before we get there, I just wanted to back off from Hofstede for a minute and show you some other ideas that I think are pretty useful. I guess what we could say is that actually, when we're looking at competence culturally, cross-cultural competence, what we are dealing with is awareness. If we take to heart the fact that people are just not the same, that cultures differ, personal cultures differ, cultures within countries differ, and cultures, from one country to another differ. So this is a very complex area. I'm not sure where I got these 4 components. They're not my own thinking, I have to say, and apologies I don't have that reference, but if anybody's seeking it, I'll look for it. So what are we talking about? Well, cross-cultural competence has these 4 components. It's about awareness, first of all, of our own worldview, and secondly, of our reactions when people are different. Have you taken time to figure out why you are so shocked by other cultures? If you think about it and you make the comparison between where you're coming from and where they're coming from, it seems to me that that's going to be a step in the direction of empowering yourself to communicate effectively. If you're a man or a woman coming out of unwanted same-sex attraction, the chances are you've experienced a great deal of isolation and loneliness. And it's easy for somebody like me to sit here and say, well, go make some friends, get out there, start getting involved. It's easy enough to do that. But it's better, I think, to give the steps of action that will help people to go out there and know how to do it. If you want to make friends and influence people, I think it's a good idea to start with them. Ask the questions that you want to know. I told you a story last week of when I was in university and I had a lot of embarrassment because I was very attracted to 2 men, and it made me very passive in this state because I would just experience this until I learned to assert myself. And what that meant in that context was that I got up, I went and introduced myself. This is after many weeks of being in this situation. I introduced myself and I tried to get to know them because instinctively I knew that was the right thing to do. And how did I do it? Well, I didn't think they would be particularly interested in anything I had to say, but I thought maybe if I asked them questions. And that's what we're doing when we learn to communicate across cultures. That was a different culture for me. It's about asking questions, and that's about learning, again, how to be assertive. So back to these 4 components. We have to be aware of cultural difference, and we have to know that difference is normal. Difference isn't dangerous. Different is just different. It's just not the same as us. And I think one of the great lessons of life is that we learn that we are different to other people. The second thing is our attitude. Our attitude towards different cultures, which reflects a willingness to honestly understand our own beliefs and values around cultural difference. So are you open to difference? Are you open to engaging with people who just don't think like you? If you are, I would suggest you have a good opportunity to be able to communicate. Maybe you're thinking, why is this relevant? I know all of this, or this is just common sense. Well, again, this is about practical steps of action to learn how to be assertive. And for those of us who are more retiring and unwilling to get with other people, knowing how to ask questions, knowing how to, gently probe into difference so that we understand another person's culture, I think can be a really positive way of connecting with other people and filling the void and the loneliness that we have when we've missed out in life and we haven't socialized in a way that has given us fulfillment and connection. Good to see Ferguson here. And Michal, it's very good to have you again. Thank you for taking the time and being here. So awareness, attitudes, and skills, the importance of practicing cultural competence, including non-verbal communication, to become effective cross-culturally. The thing is, people read us in different ways. Some of our signs and gestures, which are quite normal in our own home cultures, are really offensive in any other culture. And if we don't learn these differences, we can make mistakes when we try to communicate cross-culturally. Another reason why I would say that all this is really important is because people who have a mission in life, people who have got a reason to get up in the morning, who are going to work and putting bread on the table and doing all of that, but in addition have a lifelong goal, something that they long to achieve. Well, those are the people, I have to say, in my own environment of working with people with same-sex attraction, those are the ones who are often highly motivated. And because they've got a mission and a purpose in life, it's almost as though they are intrinsically motivated to deal with some of the issues that they are dealing with. And for those of us who are helping them, it's very important to encourage and strengthen that so that it actually grows. And again, that contributes to healthy assertiveness in life. Finally, development. Some may be naturally, culturally competent, but most will have to develop this. I can't stress this enough, that it's going to take practice. It's going to take active listening. It's going to mean that you are maybe silent in your observation of cultural contexts that you're interested in penetrating. And once you've done the reconnaissance, once you've isolated or, found the people who represent that culture, so to speak, once you've studied them a bit and read up and gone to YouTube and looked on the web and tried to find something about the culture that they represent. It might be a religious culture. It might be a business culture. It might be within education. It might be theological, all sorts of different cultural frontiers that you and I need to cross if we're going to be effective communicators. I just want to remind us again of something that I think I spoke about last week, because it still has a bearing here. I mentioned the whole theory of transactional analysis, which tries to understand the cultures within us, the kind of intraculture that all of us have. We represent one point of view to the world, but very often inside us, there's all sorts of things going on. And transactional analysis is a very practical way of helping us to understand ourselves. Just a reminder, why do we need to understand ourselves? To empower us to become more assertive and more effective in the way we communicate. So, in a nutshell, TA, transactional analysis, teaches us that within us we have a parent, which is often very critical. It's a set of ideas and values that have been imported from dominant interactions and relationships that we experience. And very often the parent is critical. That's the voice you carry with you when you try and do anything. If you're building a shed and you've misread the instructions and you've got something upside down or back to front, that's the voice that hammers you and tells you you shouldn't even be doing this because you don't get it right. It's often a very perfectionistic voice within us. And then there's also the child who gets so frustrated that throws the hammer down and leaves the shed that you're building and, quits and goes and does something else. This is the child that is full of tantrums, that is not very rational, that is easily hurt, etc. That's the inner child within you. I was encouraging viewers last week to begin to understand that part of you and to realize the only way to deal with the inner child that is really clingy and really demanding and comes at embarrassing times when you least expect it. How do you deal with it? Well, you have to bend down to him. You have to embrace him or her. You have to understand his or her needs and figure out why this has happened and work to understand, even the age of that child, because that will tell you something about the traumas and the past experiences within yourself that you need to be dealing with if you're going to look at this closely. And of course, for Christians, all of this is subject to the sanctifying work of the Holy Spirit, of his working within us to put us back together, to make us, not perfect, not museum pieces, not turning the clock back so that nothing ever happened, but making us good enough so that we can function and have the best chance to do things in life. So the critical parent is a part of us. The child that is born in the history of experience in each of our lives. And then the adult, the integrating adult who brings us together. It's the mind of reason. It's the mind that or the voice that puts the critical, perfectionistic parent in his place and encourages and nurtures the child to realize that there'll be a better day and a better way of doing things. So PAC, parent, adult, and child, that's part of the culture that each of us have intrapsychically, if you like. Psychologically, we are all unique, and it's a specific culture. And often learning to relate to, a marriage partner or somebody who's special in our lives, well, it's a good understanding to see how they work things out in their lives, because you're going to meet the child, the adult, and the parent in your friends and in your family. You may as well learn something about it. If you don't like the theory, well, chuck it out, as we say. Take the meat and leave the bones. I think it's a useful thing. Okay, so how are we doing, folks? It's great to have you today. Somebody told me they like to watch the thing after the event because they can turn it off. Research says that, an hour-long lecture is not a good idea. Nobody absorbs an hour. Well, the great thing is you can pick this up on YouTube or on Facebook where the recorded session will be. And if you like something, you can watch a bit of it and then switch it off and come back to it. So I'm all for that. Right, I'm just going to go back a bit to Hofstede, who is the one that we started speaking about. Give me a chance here. I'm just looking for some of the things that he has said very usefully. So I'm going to just make this large. Hofstede said this, culture is that which distinguishes one group of people from another. Cultures are adaptations of people to the conditions of life. Cultures may change or they may be resistant. According to one theory, that's the theory of Hofstede. Actually, these are my words here, but I'm referring to Hofstede. According to one theory, although each culture is different, they all meet 5 basic problems in life. So in other words, you know, whether you're in Malaysia or in Great Britain or in Malta or in Poland, or you come from, can't remember where you're from, Banya, but I'll remember just now. So wherever we're from, the dominant cultures in those countries, and yes, we've already said there are multiple cultures in countries. Of course there are multiple cultures within families, but the dominant culture in all of these countries have adapted to life through particular circumstances. That's what I want to focus on for a few minutes. Hofstede has identified through the IBM research and other research 5 natural areas that we all adopt or adapt to in our cultures. And the first one relates to identity. So what we're saying here is that cultural identities are the way in which people relate to the whole group. So depending on what's happening in the whole group nationally, or, you know, dominant parts of a society, so that is going to impact on the way I identify as a member of that society. I may identify as a Catholic or as a Protestant or as a Pentecostal. I may identify, you know, according to some identity listed by the 52 Facebook genders. I may take one of the letters of the LGBTQ+. All of those identities represent something about my cultural values that are really important to me. And generally, societies portray a sense of identity, a national identity. And of course, there's such a thing as stereotyping. That's something else. We're not going to get into that necessarily at the moment, but identity is really important. And here's the point. Historically, according to Hofstede and many other cultural theorists, cultures have developed in countries that are on a continuum between highly individualistic, something that we find in the West, particularly in the US, certainly in Great Britain, and collectivism, where in collectivism there's a much stronger sense of belonging. There's a stronger sense of the nuclear family. Whereas in individualistic cultures and societies, the nuclear family has often begun to break down. So what we're saying here is that different countries and different peoples will be somewhere on this continuum. You're going to see the point of this if you are brave enough to stay to the end. The second thing that cultures are reacting to is hierarchy or leadership. Who's in control? What are the power relations in my country? And dare I speak up and tell the government when they're wrong? Or if I do that, am I going to be, incarcerated, put in prison, fined, damaged, and my career hindered because I have spoken out? So in a large power distance, it's probable that I will not open my mouth. And there is a great distance between myself as an ordinary person and those who lead the country. But in smaller power distance contexts, that's not the case. In that context, people are free to criticize. So that's going to have because of these power relations between ordinary people and leaders, the hierarchy within a nation, that's going to have a bearing on the way people react to society and what people do. But there's also such a thing as the way in which a culture adapts to gender. This is what he says: cultures adapt to dominant gender roles and the control of aggression. Unequal distribution leads to emphasis on achievement rather than caring. And so in dealing with gender in a nation, we're not talking about male and female here. We're talking about aggressiveness in contrast to caring. So Hofstede has used the term masculine and feminine, not male and female. It's something different. But here's the point. A highly masculine culture is very aggressive, doesn't do too much caring, and doesn't value too much caring. And in a feminine society, it's the exact opposite. It's not about aggression. It's not about assertion. It's about caring. They would call themselves loving. So a culture that is dominantly feminine, as opposed to a culture that is dominantly masculine, is going to feel different to those who visit those countries and those cultures. Another couple of things that we should highlight: truth. In Hofstede, how cultures respond to a visitor who has come with a whole lot of ideas. Well, they're going to have a particular understanding of truth where there is strong uncertainty avoidance. In those cultures where difference is dangerous, they're going to react very strongly to difference. They're going to close ranks and push things out. Whereas cultures that have a weak uncertainty avoidance will look as though anything goes. They're very free and easy. They accept things. Remember, we're talking about a continuum from strong uncertainty avoidance all the way to weak uncertainty avoidance. And cultural values in a country or among people will register somewhere along that continuum, if you get my meaning. So identity, hierarchy, gender, and truth are the first four, and the last one is virtue. This is the choice between instant and delayed gratification. The countries that spend the money, a pandemic comes and feels like every last cent is spent. Okay, that's very caring, very generous. But other countries will look at that and say, that's amazing that such incredible debt can be, sanctioned to try and resolve a problem. So in this continuum, continuum. It's the difference between those who want to solve the problem now and will throw as much money at the problem to try and solve it, versus those who will allow things to drift and are much more cautious, and they are long-term. So it's the continuum between long-term and short-term gratification. So I know it's a big mouthful, but it's going to be worth it, I believe. Let me just take it to the next level and show you where I think this goes to. So in these different cultures and their cultural context, remember, has, according to Hofstadter anyway, reacted to 5 fundamental things. They've established an identity. They have something to say about hierarchy. They respond to femininity and masculinity in different ways, how they deal with aggression, what their police force looks like. All of that kind of thing relates to gender. How they react to their sense of, absolute truth is another cultural thing, and virtue, whether they are short-term gratifiers or long-term gratifiers, well, that's also going to register in a certain way in these cultures. But here's the point. Just have a look at this table. Those who are culturally more collectivist can misperceive culture-based behavior of foreigners as insulting, stressed, heartless, and rude. So a collectivist will see individualists as, as insulting, stressed, heartless, and rude. They're just determined to solve a problem. Whereas collectivists who are more, aligned to their family values, who will be loyal to certain individuals above certain, principles, will be perceived to be dishonest and corrupt. I'm not going to read all of this, but look at the feminine versus the masculine. Those who are more feminine, more caring, more concerned in their culture will see those who come from a more masculine culture as being aggressive, of showing off when confronted with men, or, of women taking a kind of baby doll role is the terminology that Hofstadter uses. But in other words, of a kind of over-identification of the feminine. Whereas those coming from a more masculine culture will perceive men to be weak and women to be unfeminine when they meet the opposite number in terms of culture. So also look at the last one, long-term orientated and short-term orientated. This is about gratification. Cultures that, want answers now and will throw money towards things now will be perceived to be irresponsible, throwing away money, not being careful, incurring too much debt, of overvaluing people instead of, principled guidance in terms of how the economy is run. A short-term orientated people, those who are more kind of caring and who respond quickly in crisis moments, etc., will perceive those who are, more long-term orientated to be stingy and cold. So I hope the point is being made clear here that cultural values in countries when they react with other cultures, there's going to be a mismatch unless we carefully learn what the differences are, and we observe and we respect and we try and listen to where people are coming from, and then we try and present the different point of view perhaps that we want to explain or share or offer. Some will be listening to this and saying, well, this is far too theoretical. It's true. Some people are just natural communicators. They can just, cross cultural divides and embrace cultures in a way that is very positive. And I recognize that. It's a skill that they have. But chances are circumstances in their life have led them to develop that. And rather than just saying, well, I don't have the gift, I can't do this, I think it's important to grow your assertiveness, grow your ability to communicate. Because assertiveness, apart from being a psychological state for many of us, is also something that can be practiced and developed. Okay, I'm going to move slightly on now, and I'm going to look at something else. And I'm going to refer you to another theorist, and that is a man by the name of Stephen Brookfield. Brookfield wrote an important book about becoming a critically reflective practitioner. That was the name of his book. Okay. Now, the reason why I'm interested in is because Brookfield helps us to reflect on circumstances and life, but from a critical point of view. Now, let me just hasten to add, I am not into critical theory. Critical theory is one of the tools that cultural Marxism has used in the Western nations to bring us to this point of confusion that I believe we are in now. Critical theory is something that has tried to pull down the foundations of a Western civilization. But critical reflection, I would say, is a valid concept because, we don't want to just think things through. We want to be able to think them through in a way that we can compare and contrast, where, our values are tested and where we can, work things out. Anyway, this is what Brookfield said. He spoke about the fact that if you want to examine something from a critical point of view, a positive way of looking at things that will help you to do better in the future or to succeed with a project, a good place to start is with yourself. We've been talking a lot about that, understanding yourself. You need to listen to your colleagues, pay attention to what your colleagues tell you. So it's not only your own autobiography and your own experience that is important here. Your colleagues and what they bring and what they can share, they are people that we need to listen to. And if you are in a religious community, then your fellow community persons need to be listened to. We need to have their mind as well as ourselves. Secondly, we need to look at the scholarship or the theory. What can you learn, even if it's from YouTube or reading a book, or, if you're into journal articles, all of these things can give you a perspective on what you're trying to achieve. And then you'll be in a position to talk to those who you want to try to influence. So now Brookfield was looking at education. So he wrote this book for educationists. That happens to be my discipline, my field, long ago. But I'm trying to bring that out to bear on a more general way on how we interact with culture. And I'm saying that actually this is a good model, again, for people who want to learn to be competent in what they are doing, and want to share with people by listening carefully to what they're doing. So here it is, stripped down and made bare. What you believe, your journey, your autobiography as a person in life is important. You can start with yourself. You need to listen to your colleagues and to your friends. You do need to interrogate the theory and to get models and understandings that will help you. And then finally, those who you want to reach and to influence, well, you're going to be in a better position to do that if you've gone through the process that I'm talking about. There's one other thing that I thought to share with you. Another tool. I'm going to just see how far I can get with that. With the same thing, using what we call the Johari window. You know, these things didn't drop from heaven. Don't get me wrong. This is not where I put my trust theologically. I just find these tools useful in learning how to become a more assertive and a more effective communicator. Have you ever thought of the fact that, the inner family within you actually lands in the world in a way that not even you fully understand? So if you have a look at what the Johari window is offering us here, you are public, you're also a private individual, you're partly conscious, and there's a lot of you that is subconscious or unconscious. So I want to suggest that, the conscious part of us is what we portray to the world. This is, the image that we give. We look at the world around us and we respond by having a certain image. Our public self comes across in one way. In a way, I am presenting a public self of myself right now. But there's also a private side to me that's known only to me, that I don't share, that belongs to me. And I have boundaries around that, for good or for bad. But the interesting thing is there is also, in all probability, a hidden part of me. So others can see it. You're watching me now and you're saying, oh yeah, here he goes. And this is why he does, those of you who know me. So there's a hidden part of me that I'm not even conscious of, but you are conscious of because you read me, you know me in a certain way better than I know myself. So I am known to others in areas where I am self. Have I stopped streaming? Has it gone off? There's an issue here. And then finally, don't know what's happening here. My computer is telling me something here. Hopefully it's still recording. Finally, there is the unknown self. And that's that part of me that you don't know about. I don't know about. My parents don't know about it. It's all hidden. It's the unknown self. That's probably what we deal with in therapy. Vanya's asking an important question here. Don't you share your private side with your wife? Most of it, yes. But some of it, no. And that's to be worked out, you know. If my wife was to insist on knowing and seeing everything, well, firstly, I'm not sure she would want to. Some she wouldn't be interested in. We're not talking about hiding things here that could lead to dangerous situations. It's always good to be open, but I think it's really it's really important to work out the degree to which we are open with our partners and spouses, our husbands and wives, etc. Anyway, I hope you get the principle. Johari is really useful in realizing there are parts of us that I don't even know about myself. And you do, because you can see it and you can look objectively at who I am and what I'm doing. There's also a part of myself that is not known to you and not known to me because it's hidden and it's locked down. You know, trauma visits us from that part very often and surprises us. And then, of course, there is what is conscious, that's the public self, and the private self that we don't necessarily share publicly. Anyway, I think it might be a useful tool. Friends, we have 5 minutes. I really appreciate what Ali is saying here about integrating to other cultures is a social skill, especially for immigrant families. You learn the good and the bad points from both your home culture and the foreign one. Becoming aware of other cultures makes us more aware of our own. That is a truly valid statement. You know, friends, we can take our hats off to people certainly who have emigrated and come to the UK. I met them for years in my career in higher education. And you know, the competence that they develop because they have gone through the experience of leaving their country and coming into a foreign country. They've had to work very hard to establish themselves. They've had to learn new cultures, new languages, new values, and at the same time be true to themselves and provide for the children that they bring with them the opportunity to remember the home culture as well as the new culture. These are very skilled people, folks. I often think of the African child who is getting up, you know, at 4 a.m., is making the parents breakfast or getting the parents breakfast ready, and then is out in the fields looking for the cattle, herding the cattle or the goats, whatever it is, and making sure that everything, they're all brought together and they're milked before heading back home to have a meager breakfast and then beginning a 2-mile walk to get to school. Now you compare that child with a child who grows up in the West, who you can't get out of bed, and you tell me what's the difference between the cultural values here and which one, you know, there are some skills that the African child learns at a very young age that I'm afraid our Western children don't learn and would do well to recognize in those people. I agree with you, Vanya. Discovering all these different sides and bringing them together and sharing and caring with our partners, all the hidden things, all the unknown things, all the public things, and how we create our images. I think it is a valid part of growing and learning how to do life together as married couples. So, folks, where am I going here? Let me see. Is there anything else that I wanted to share? Well, that's an awful lot that I've shared, and maybe too much theory. And maybe it isn't, it isn't from a spiritual point of view enough for some people who will watch this today. But I would argue that the process of becoming an assertive person, somebody who's not in danger of just being a follower and never knowing how to stand up from themselves, will be helped by becoming assertive. And to become more assertive, it's, I think, really important to develop skills that will help you to, interact with other people in a positive way. So I hope that what I am sharing here is a number of skills and a number of ways that will help you to engage with other people. I remember when I was struggling with same-sex attraction a long time ago, my biggest enemy was my isolation. I couldn't tell anyone. There was too much shame and too much pain in my life. And yet I knew instinctively that where this was coming from was the fact that I was very lonely and I didn't know how to have connection and intimacy with any other human being, particularly people of the same sex. Now, I've only scratched the surface here, and I've only begun to share something about the need to be assertive. But I'm hoping that some of these skills, some of these principles, some of these models can be useful in your journey as you go ahead in life and come out of isolation and look for ways of connecting with other human beings. Well, folks, we're almost at the end of the broadcast today, and I really thought that I had uploaded all of the episodes. I think next week is about ancestors, where we come from. I'm not into ancestor worship, don't get me wrong. This is about figuring out the impact our family has had on us, because there is such a thing as trauma that relates to families, and trauma that actually we inherit because of the way our parents dealt with trauma in their lives, and sometimes impacts us in the way we respond to it. Sometimes traumas are communicated across generations. So there's such a thing as intergenerational and cross-generational trauma. And in war contexts, so if you take Northern Ireland and the trauma that came because of 30 years of troubles, and huge political upheaval, it's easy to see, that the role of fathers and the relationship between fathers and sons and the relationship between husbands and wives, the way husbands relate or fathers relate to daughters and mothers relate to sons, I think it has a bearing on the cultural traumas that have been experienced in different countries. Now, I can't get into it more, but if you're interested, come back next week. Let's talk about the impact of cross-generational trauma and the role of people who have gone before us, how that may impact on us. I'll share some more about my own journey and story as a way of illustrating, if that would be okay. But thank you so much for joining us today. Would you join with me in prayer? If you're a person of faith, then let's pray together. If that's not your thing, that's okay. Allow us to do it. It's just something that is really important to us. Father, I pray for your hand upon us. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be together in this way. I thank you for these good people who have invested their time here. Please would you bless them and encourage them in their lives and bring us back together if that would be your will. Thank you so much, folks, for coming. May God bless you and be with you and encourage you as you go on today.